Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you'll be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. If you've been inspired by the guests that we've had on the podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, hit notification bells, whatever you can do on the platforms that you're listening on, so that more people have the opportunity of hearing these and engaging in our community. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Andy Hawthorne. Andy, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Mancunian, born and bred, still live in Manchester, born in Manchester, always lived in Manchester, and I have a ministry that was birthed in Manchester, which is basically we do three things. We have what we call community transformation projects. So we move people to live in the most deprived communities. And we have what we call community groceries with thousands and thousands of members feeding families who are struggling at this time. We do prisons work and bus ministry. So that's community transformation. We do creative mission, bands who are going into schools, and we do a huge thing called Festival Manchester this summer, the biggest thing we've ever done, 100,000 people in Windsor Park. And then the final thing we do is training and equipping. So we gather people here from around the world for a year to be trained in Manchester, but we also train evangelists in 87 nations through what we call advanced groups. So we're kind of plate spinners, lots of things going on, but the gospel right at the center in words and actions. And it's been an amazing journey. The charity's been going 30 years. 5 years before that, I started doing stuff out of a business I had in inner city Manchester. And God's been good.
This is probably the most important question I'll ask during the whole podcast, but are you a red or blue?
A red. I'm Man United.
Oh, good. I'm a red as well. So that we could have either had complete division from the start on this podcast, but it turns out it's complete unity. So that's wonderful.
It's nothing to rejoice over at the moment, though. To be honest.
No, it isn't. That's true.
1 minute.
But we need each other to cry on each other's shoulders. So we need the support.
There's people out in the Middle East and everywhere won't have a clue what you're talking about.
I think they'll all know.
You ought to explain yourself.
I think they'll all know.
Oh, Daphne, Man United. Everybody knows Man United.
Everyone
it is one of those
Man
brands, one of those weird brands where you go into the townships and into the poorest places around the world, and they're all like Ronaldo, Man United. Say Manchester, yeah. That's right.
Okay, so could you maybe take us back a little bit? What was your upbringing like, and did that have a big impact on what you're doing now?
Yeah, massively. So my mum and dad became Christians when I was about 3 years old. So before I could even remember, and there was like a mini revival on our road in Hambleton Road in South Manchester through an amazing old lady called Olive Clark, who set up these young wives Bible groups, and the young wives became Christians, and shortly after the husbands came in. And so I was made to go to church from being, very little, didn't really enjoy it, and certainly didn't connect with me. But when I was 12 years old, I went to a concert by a band called The Sheep, which is a terrible name for a Christian band. But age 12, I thought they were pretty cool. And I actually did give my life to Christ. Evangelist preached, did the invitation. I don't think I'd ever seen anything like that before, even though I'd gone to an Anglican church as far back as I could remember. So, but I didn't really live it until I was 17. I made that commitment, went to church bit at start, and then got into all sorts of nonsense as a teenager. But all through this is the cool bit of the story, all through my teenage years, my mum and Olive Clark and a bunch of other people were praying for me and for my brother, Simon, who was really going off the rails, in trouble with the police and drugs and things. And when I was 17 and my brother Simon was 19, he started going out with a girl called Leslie. Leslie had a cousin in Blackpool, and she went over to visit this cousin, and they wandered together into a second-hand bookshop, just a regular bookshop. And on the side was a book by a fella called Arthur Blessett. Daphne might remember him.
Yep.
He used to travel the world with a big cross, and he was a kind of hippie evangelist. But anyway, he'd been in the schools in Blackpool doing his thing. And Leslie, my brother's girlfriend's cousin, said, "Oh, we've just had that guy in our school," or something like that. And can I buy you his book for 5 pence? And she bought this book and gave it to Leslie, my brother's girlfriend. And Leslie was like, okay. And she was so impressed when she read this book that she gave it to a boyfriend, my brother. And my brother opened this book 1977 this is, and on the inside flap it said, "To Simon, with love from Mum, Christmas 1974." And this is a book that my mum had bought for Simon, and she used to buy us a Christian book every Christmas alongside all the things we wanted, and they would stay on our bookshelf unread. But then, because Olive was praying and my mum was praying, this book somehow got off our bookshelf 50 miles away into the second-hand bookshop in Blackpool, into his girlfriend's hands and back round to him. Wow. And it was like, people were praying, Hound of Heaven was moving, and he opened this book and he was like, "Hello, this is To Simon with love from God." And he was so challenged by it. There was a little prayer at the end of the book, and he gave his life to Christ and had a massive encounter with the Holy Spirit. And then he rang me up and said, "Andy, it's true. I've given my life to Jesus." I'm like, "What? Come to church with me this Sunday." So we both went to church, probably hadn't been for 5 years. And shortly after that, Simon told his story. I fully gave my life to Christ. And I remember kneeling on my bedroom floor saying, "If you'll have me back, God, this is it." I didn't realize that God loves to have idiots like Andy Hawthorne back. You know, prodigals coming home warms his heart. So I came fully, and really that's nearly 45 years ago. And I've not been the perfect Christian, far from it, but I've not looked back. And I think that night, way back then, 77, God gave me a heart of an evangelist, love to tell people who don't know Jesus about Jesus. And that's what's kept me going, really, for the last 45 years. So then I shortly after that went into business with Simon. And we set up a fashion business in Manchester, which is where the message was born, really.
Did you set up the business knowing that it would be a catalyst for the ministry stuff, and not that you necessarily make a division?
We'd both been such idiots at school that we didn't have any qualifications. So, and I was a salesman. And so we just set up this fashion business, and it grew. And we ended up employing we had our factory in the inner city. It was a manufacturing business. So, and we employed lots of local tearaways, and it was their kind of broken lives. And the fact that on our doorstep, we literally couldn't find a church that would connect with them in any meaningful way. And so arrogantly, we wrote to every church in Manchester. This is like, fast forward now, this is like 1987. Man. And I've been a Christian 10 years. And we wrote to every church in Manchester, booked the biggest rock venue for a week. And we're like, the Hawthorne brothers are going to organise Manchester's biggest ever youth mission. Like, yeah, as if we could. But God saw the heart and incredibly got behind us. And remember that first night we had the idea back in 87. I was like, "Oh God, is this right? It's going to cost a fortune. We're out of a depth." But God spoke to me clearly through Isaiah 43, verses 18 to 21. That was my set reading for the day. And he said, "I see I'm doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? There'll be rivers in the desert and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals will honor me. Those are formed to declare my praise." And we've still got those scriptures all around the building here in Manchester, all those years later. And in some ways, we haven't moved from those scriptures that God's doing a new thing. We need to perceive it. It's the desert places, the wasteland places, and these wild animals, which was a good description of a lot of the young men and women we were employing, are formed to declare his praise. If they can just connect in and get filled with his spirit, they can be truly declaring his praise. So that's what we did it again in 89. Shortly after, we formed a band, even though I couldn't sing, dance or rap, called the Worldwide Message Tribe. And again, God just blessed it. And that band, that funny Christian band, that was me and my mate trying to go into Manchester high schools in my spare time out of my business. We ended up like selling 400,000 albums and playing to millions of people. It was crazy. And at that point, I thought, all I want to do is this. So I left the business and we set up the charity 30 years ago. And as a one-man band out of my mate's spare bedroom, and it's grown. And so we have a couple of hundred staff here in the UK, but thousands of volunteers and hundreds of people who've moved to live in the inner city. And now we have, as I said, we're training evangelists in 87 nations, and we have message hubs around the world. So it's been quite a journey.
So I'm just going to jump on the last thing you said, although I could go back through many of the things you said, and we very well might. Training evangelists, what does it look like to train evangelists in these nations? Because I think everybody has a concept that you pull them into a hall and you hold a big conference and you talk to them about how to do it. Maybe they go out and practice, or maybe they don't. That is a stereotypical, I think, impression from what you say. But can you unpack what it looks like now for you?
Yeah, well, it was really 7 years ago that we started doing that in a much more deliberate way. In fact, what happened was this Ugandan prophet called John Bunjo, who's often spoken into the message and is amazing. He phoned me up from Uganda and said, I'm coming over, Andy, and I have a word for your movement. You need to gather the troops. And I'm like, okay, John, whatever you say. So I got all the guys in our big warehouse here in Manchester. And he said, the Lord speaking to Isaiah 60, arise, shine, for your light's come. You're going to see a move of God. He's ready. And you need to get away, Andy, and seek the Lord. I'm looking at my diary thinking, oh, I've not got much time to seek the Lord at the moment. And I think he probably meant 21 days fasting in the desert or something. But I went away for a couple of days in the Lake District, and God did speak, actually. And I really felt key thing was about multiplication, that I should just gather 12 of our most fruitful young evangelists, next generation, interesting the name of your ministry, generation to generation, that I should gather the kind of next generation of evangelists, young guys in their 20s and 30s, and invest in them. And so I came back with this little plan, said, guys, if you want to join, and we'll have 12 of us will meet every month, we'll pray together, but we'll WhatsApp each other every day, and we'll encourage every time we see anyone becoming a Christian, and we'll wrestle with what kind of gospel we preach to produce disciples, and we'll be super accountable, ask each other tough questions about our lifestyle and our spiritual disciplines. And also, you will think about guys you could gather around you. And a girl here at the message set up a girls group. We just kept it single sex, not to be weird, but just because we wanted that high level of accountability, people to really, ask tough questions about lifestyle and what you're looking at on your computer, and et cetera, et cetera. So we formed the first advanced group 7 years ago, and it's been one of these crazy things. It wasn't even called advanced then, but those 12 guys formed 12 groups in the next year, and Emma's girls group started to multiply, and it's just been one of those things where God's just breathed on it. So now we're in 87 nations, and then new nations coming on board all the time. We've got ambassadors all over the world, and just crazy things happening, tens of thousands of evangelists being trained. Got 3 of our guys in Brazil at the moment, and Brazil's our best nation. More advanced groups in Brazil than in the UK, but India's taken off, every nation in Africa, just crazy God thing. And Ben Jack, who heads up advanced for us, this amazing young evangelist, he came back from India about a month ago, and with all the denominations taking on advance, and the main TV network taking it on and promoting it, and Ben's coming back like, there's going to be thousands of new groups launched this year in India. And I said to Ben, I wonder if I feel a bit like, Nicky Gumbel when Alpha really kicked off, sort of thinking, what, this might work, this advanced thing. And that's how I feel at the moment. It's totally out of control. I'm sure there's groups happening in loads of countries we don't know about, but it's free. God likes that. God loves giving. So as fast as we can, we're translating these materials into different languages to equip group leaders. And it's not some high bar to say I'm a group leader. I go to theological college for 3 years. Just start meeting together to think about reaching your mates. And it's the Lord. So if you want, it's all there on advancedgroups.org. All the free materials, all the testimonies, all the resourcing. So very exciting. All the languages, yeah.
And we'll put that link in the description. So if you're listening, go to the description box. The link's there ready for you to go and check out.
Great.
A lot of what you said, like you said earlier, resonates with who we are, and what we're up to might look a bit different, but definitely resonates. And one of the things that we say on the platform, which makes people look twice, and bear in mind, often it's thousands of pastors we're talking to, and we say, we want to tell you we don't believe in making disciples. And you see everybody look up like, what you're going to say. We said, but we believe in disciples who make disciples,
Yeah,
who
that's
make
it.
disciples, who make disciples. And that's really what you're talking about with this advance, isn't it? Because
Exactly.
too often people talk about making disciples, and then you're in this discipleship relationship for the next 20 years and it goes nowhere. So to have this concept of we're making disciples who make disciples who make disciples, and may it roll on until he returns.
Yeah, beautiful. And it
So
feels like, and I'm praying, may not do it, but I'm praying, please God, would you allow us to be multiplying evangelists in every nation on earth? We'll be in half the nations on earth by the end of this year, but just that sense of just wanting to obey the Great Commission to go to every nation. And I can't do that, but by virally multiplying this gift and just trying to raise up faithful guys and girls around the world, the harvest could be immense.
well, we believe, looking at the generation who could complete the Great Commission and see his return.
Yeah.
The heads of the major mission organisations met together and they issued a statement that this emerging generation can easily complete the Great Commission in their lifetime. So it's, to me, it's a massive honour, privilege, responsibility to be the generation before them who God chose to raise them up for the days that we're living in. And personally, I don't know a greater honour than that.
No, that's it. And things are, you can tell in one sense, things are spiraling out of control. It feels like spiraling towards the end times, but God's pouring out his spirit in unprecedented measure on the earth. And where God finds a heart, he's just looking for that person. And so we are living in amazing days. And who knows, we may be living in the greatest generation in world history when Jesus returns. When saints should live like it. It's what, that's what was a great spur to the early church, wasn't it? Jesus could come back at any minute, and we're clearly closer than they were. So well,
we find when we are challenging young people, when we have many of them, we find that they are ready for a challenge. They want somebody to believe in them. They want to be held to do something greater than they even thought they could. And when we say to them, are you willing to give your lives for this?
Yes.
Give your lives for him. We're not talking about giving up smoking or giving up drinking. We're talking about, are you willing to give even your lives for the sake of the gospel? And they weep and they're on their knees. I'm going to cry. They're on their knees. And I think this generation is wanting us to set the bar higher for them. When the young people in my life, I love them to pieces. We have so much fun. But I hold them to high account. And when they keep coming back to me, I'll say to them, why do you keep coming back? I mean, you know the standard I'm going to set for you. I'm going to be asking tough questions. And they said, we come back because nobody else does that. Yeah. And so...
people aren't, that's right. People aren't not becoming Christians because it's too hard. The turn away because it's just too easy. It's just wet. Yep. They want the high bar. And God's really been speaking to me recently through Esther. I've never really preached on Esther, but I got stuck in Esther for a couple of weeks, just going over and over this amazing story. But this, it says beautiful, shapely young woman. So about as far from me as you could get in every aspect, but she had God's hand up. But what did she say? Well, the first thing that God spoke to me about, Mordecai says, you need to go and rescue the people. But if you don't, surely somebody else will be raised up. And there is that sense of, actually, God's going to rescue people. It's just whether we want to be part of the action or not. But we need, if we're going to be on a rescue mission, we need to be able to say with Esther, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. What's the point? If I'm not serving God's purposes, it's all on the line here for God's purposes. And that's what I think young people are looking for.
Yeah. We talk about Esther and Mordecai in our conferences, and we talk about different discipleship relationships. And I say, look, let's forget in the bigger picture of what's going on with Esther and Mordecai. Let's look at their relationship with each other. And, we all focus on, they're born for such a time as this, and Esther risking her life. And I feel a bit bad for Mordecai, because I'm like, Mordecai, she probably may not have been able to do that if it hadn't have been for the way that Mordecai had poured into her life. But also, we all just sort of gloss over the fact that Mordecai had risked his life first. Yeah. And he had shown Esther, look, I'm risking my life here. And because I have, now it's your turn. Follow in my footsteps. You go and risk your life. And this is sort of what you're doing. You're setting the example for these people that you're raising up around the world. You've gone ahead of them. You've shown them what you're willing to do. And now, hey, it's your turn. Come follow in my footsteps.
Great. Yeah, that's right. Mordecai came so close to being impaled, didn't he? But instead of that, the enemy was impaled. Yeah. And the edict was written to utterly annihilate the Jews. And yet suddenly by the end of the book, there's this totally opposite edict written over young people's lives, which is amazing, isn't it? Written over a nation's life. That's only the gospel could do that. Yeah.
We another thing to say on the platform, and we like to give these statements and make people look for a minute before you tell them what they're going to say. We say, many say that this is the Joshua generation to enter the land. And we say, no, we do not say that. We say this is the time for Moses and Joshua to enter together. We're not going to model ourselves on something that went wrong, because I believe God intended Moses to enter the land, but because he dishonored God before the people and never went. So, we have a strong call, not just on the young people, but for the generation before them to step up, to lead the way and to lead them out. Do you want to say about what's about to happen when we go back to Brazil? Tell Andy.
One of we've done a couple of conferences with some churches in Brazil that we've been in relationship with for probably about 15 years. But we talk about how one whole generation is responsible for the next. It's not a calling to the next generation. There are no departments in the Bible. It's one whole generation is responsible. And so we've said to these churches, one of them is about 1,500. We've said, look, you've heard our conferences. You know that everyone here is responsible for the next generation. And so we're going to leave you with a challenge. We said we're going to come back in 6 months. And in 6 months, we want everyone at the church to go out and reach 2 young people from outside the church, either children or youth, and then bring them to the church, bring them into a relationship with Christ. And then in 6 months' time, when we come back, we're going to have a massive celebration where you can bring these 2 young people that you've reached out to. Now that church, if everyone did it, would have 3,000 young people that they'd reached out to in 6 months, and they'd all be in discipleship relationships. And so this is what we're going back to Brazil in a few weeks to do, to follow up and have this big celebration. But it's just the importance of one whole generation taking responsibility for the next. And we really need everyone to take that on, because political systems know this. Other religions know this, that if you're going to turn a nation, you have to take that next generation.
Of course. Yeah. Spot on.
We have a big heart for unreached nations, and we raise a lot of young people up to go out to these places and reach these unreached people groups. One of the things we noticed on your site is talking about reaching the hard to reach people. Can you talk a bit about that? People may have heard that, this unreached people groups, but what do you mean when you say that the hard to reach people?
Yeah, so I guess it's people who've never heard the gospel in language they can understand. And you don't need to go at the far ends of the earth to reach those people. That's a great thing to do, by the way, to go out to the places, the nations on earth where gospel is just not being heard, or it's illegal to take a Bible. So it's great to go to those places. But on our doorstep, there are millions of people who've never heard the gospel in language they can understand. And they just, so we're doing these community groceries around the country now. Got about 16,000 member families now. And it is frightening how many of these people in the UK in our day come to our groceries and they know nothing of the gospel. So we've planted a church here on the back of the one in Manchester, and it's growing like crazy. But we have small groups across this vast council estate called Wythenshawe. But couple of weeks ago, a girl called Beth came into our small group in Benchill in Wythenshawe, and we had a little prayer time at the end, and she said, can you just say halfway through the prayer time, she said, can I just say, how do I pray to become a Christian? So I said, let's just stop here, Beth, and explained the gospel. We prayed with her. She gave her life to Christ. It was amazing. But she came back the next week, and I read a psalm, and I said, like, this is a psalm of David. And this girl, Beth, said, oh, is that like David and Goliath? So I said, yeah, that's the guy. So she said, was he around at the time of Jesus? I said, oh, no, that's like 1,000 years before or something, way back. She's like, well, fancy that. And then she said to Sue next to her, Sue, did you know that David wasn't around at the time of Jesus? Sue's like, no, I had no idea. Fancy that. But it is like that level of Bible literacy, that level of understanding on our doorstep, so-called Christian country. There are people who are unreached people everywhere we go, and it's not on. And we need the church to rise up and get out there and tell people, demonstrate it. Of course, we demonstrate it through feeding families who are struggling at a time like this through the groceries, but feeding them with the bread of life, even more important. So definitely.
I remember being in a situation like you've just described, with them not knowing anything. And there are moments in my life, I think, there are no words to describe the honour of the moment.
Yeah.
And what comes out of your mouth might be the first words that are written on this person's life, the first glimpses they have of Jesus, the first impression they're going to have. It's like you're not totally, but you're handed this clean plate. I know it's got a lot of other trash on the plate, but you're going to make that first impression that's going to make or break the moment. Yeah. And I think, what a privilege and what an honour to be in that moment with somebody.
Yeah. And so it's never part of the plan. In fact, I spent 30 years saying we were never going to plant a church. But during lockdown, we saw all these people saved. And there was no church stepping up. Churches were all closed. And so we literally had to. We had 200 people who'd come to Christ who were begging for a church. But it's been so beautiful to have a church that's so rough and ready and brand new, and people who are just wide-eyed with wonder at this gospel, that they somehow thought it was some weird, boring religious thing, and they're finding out it's life in Christ to use the best going. So that's been a great thing. And then I had the joy on Sunday. Last Sunday I was preaching in Telford, and another grocery there, All Nations Church, have planted out into this car showroom in Telford. It's amazing. Again, probably 200, but vast majority, it felt like to me, newbies, all thoroughly engaged in this grocery and this church from the grocery, came in because they could struggling to feed the families and in all kinds of debt, and then came through to Christ. It's so beautiful.
So what happened during lockdown? You said during lockdown, all these people came. Can you tell us what happened during that?
Well, when we had Boris's big announcement almost exactly 2 years ago, it was like we were like rabbit in the headlights to start with, because basically everything we do, going into schools, going into prisons, sending our buses out, big events, prayer, gathering people, the whole thing, like so much else that was happening in the world, just shut down overnight. And so we just thought, what are we going to do? So we decided we were going to, and some of the families that we've been connected with were struggling like mad. If you're on free school meals and suddenly you've got no free school meals to feed your families, it happened so suddenly. For the first few weeks, there was nothing in place really. And so we started just delivering food out, getting as much food as we could, just delivering it out and praying for families on the doorstep in Wythenshawe. We've got 110,000 people just literally across the road from where I'm sat now. And so we were delivering these food. It was amazing. And then we went over to collect some food from a pantry in Wigan, not a Christian, but they were kindly giving us some food, because we repurposed our kitchens to prepare all this food. And it was like a shop. So you could go in, and for £3, they would get a surplus food from the supermarkets and fair share. And you could do, rather than a food parcel, like a food bank, it was open every day, and you could go in, and for £3 you could fill up your basket with it felt like so much more dignity. So on the way back, my son said, we should do this, Dad, we should set one up here in Charleston. So in a few weeks, we scrambled around, kitted out this space. We've got like a farm shop and got the food and flyed all our free school meals families and just hoped they'd turn up. And it was beautiful. The first morning, they were queuing down the street. But when they joined, we said, well, for ours, we're going to encourage every member to do Alpha and Christians Against Poverty. And we have all sorts of cooking classes and IT training and help with debt and all kind. But everywhere and everything, we preach the gospel. And so before long, we'd seen 200 members come to Christ. And the church that used to meet in our building had closed down. Literally, they'd stopped meeting during lockdown, and then they decided they were going to go into some sort of home church thing. And so we had to do it basically, pragmatically. God was on the move. And so that's been such an adventure. In some ways I could do without the work, but it's also such a buzz to see all these brand new, unchurched, tough people come to Christ. So, yeah. And now, so we've got 14 of these groceries, but I think four are either brand new church plants where vast majority are from grocery, and the other churches are like over 50% of their members have come through that, just being fed and loved on and experiencing the love of God and then giving their life to Christ. So, yeah, 26 baptisms they're having at this church, the Telford Church next week. And we're baptizing people every month in the grocery. It's so precious.
That's phenomenal. And there's so many people went through that moment of crisis when everything shut down. But hear stories like yours and our ministry as well, just new things developed and it just exploded that you never would have probably even thought of if we hadn't been forced into those situations.
Exactly. That whole thing of what the devil meant for harm, that can always turn it around for good.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
And there's that need, there was that desperate need for community where everyone didn't have the opportunity to engage with other people, even their own families. And there are some other churches that we know of that just every week, people just getting saved over and over and over again. You wonder how many people, because of churches not being open and not having the ability to engage with other people, how many people kind of slip through the nets. But it's amazing to see what God has done over these last couple of years. He's really done some pretty amazing things.
And how much do we need the Christian church to step up now? Because the harvest is on and we can't, and COVID in some ways has been a passion killer, I think, for a lot of Christians. But the churches who are stepping up and are going for a seeing really literally unprecedented harvest. So
I think there's a new category of unchurched now. And they're not unreached, but they're now in the category of unchurched because when churches close down, I've forgotten what the statistics are, but there's a huge statistic out there of people who will never return to church.
Yeah.
Of people who...
They said, do you plan on returning to church once all the restrictions are over? And basically, I think it was like 30% said, no, we don't plan to return.
Scary, yeah.
So there's a new... Well, I do not use that to pass judgment on their relationship with Jesus. I think that's a whole different issue. But it does concern me when the scripture says, do not neglect the meeting together, even more as the time gets near.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that scripture came right against the wall of the lockdown. Because it was saying, no, you're not going to meet together even more as the time gets near. But I know for us, and I think for many ministries and for you too, it was a time when we had to stop and we put metaphorically everything we were doing on a shelf, metaphorically. And then we went with a clean slate and we said, we want to be as the people of Issachar who know the signs of the times and know what to do. And a whole lot sprang up for us out of that.
Yeah, great.
So how do you see yourself? Do you have a vision for going forward? how do you see
Me
things
personally, or as the
unfolding?
Message Trust? Well, personally,
Personally, or as the Message Trust?
yeah,
I
well,
know. Anyway, you which?
yeah. Well, personally, I'm feeling like, what I feel like God's saying, and we've got this huge Festival Manchester, it's called, which we've got this Withenshaw Park, and every street in Manchester being prayed for, and thousands of Christians being trained in evangelism and service, and loads of different outcomes, beautiful outcomes, hundreds of kids being fostered and adopted into Christian families, and so many great things. But after that, for the first time ever, I'm going to have a couple of months off where I'm going to seek the Lord about, I'll be 62 then, and I've still got 20 good years at least, I'm believing. So, but I am really thinking that probably it's going to be going local and going global. Perhaps even somebody else will sit in this chief executive's chair, and I'll be, going after the nations with Advance and some of our hubs, but also investing in this 110,000 people on our doorstep. So we keep it rooted and earthed in some of the poorest communities in Britain, to prove it among some of what have been previously the hardest hearts. If you drive around Withenshaw, just boarded up churches everywhere. Well, so I'm really feeling I want to invest in that. I feel like if it can be proved here, wow, but also go for the nation. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking personally. Message Trust, we're going to just keep seeking the Lord, and we are, because I think at our best we're pioneering and apostolic, and we perceive his new things. I'm sure God's got some new stuff for us that we haven't even thought about yet. We hadn't even thought of groceries 2 years ago, or Advanced 10 years ago, and look what's happened. So yeah.
Well, while we draw towards a close, I want to read the your vision statement off your website, and there's one word I think which explains a lot of what's happened. I'm not excluding the power of the Holy Spirit and God breathing on it, but I think there's one key word. You said the Message Tribe is a worldwide movement passionately sharing the love of Jesus Christ in words and actions with the hardest to reach young people and communities. And the word that comes out as we listen to you speaking, and the word that comes out on here is passionate.
Yeah.
Passionately sharing. And your passion is catching, makes me want to go faster and harder and go forward. And when you have passion, people catch it.
Yeah, and we have some values, and if you come to our headquarters, there's some posters on the wall, 4 values, but the first value is passion, because it's the passionate people who change the world. It's not the best looking, most resourced. It's the passionate people. Without passion, you're going to go nowhere. And if we can't be passionate about Jesus, what's wrong with us? You think of all he's done for us. You've got to be passionate, but it's the passionate people so we're passionate for Christ, but we're passionate for the lost and the broken, and passionate to see him do things that only he can do. But the great thing is, back to Esther, he loves to partner with ordinary people like us to do it, doesn't he? And that's the greatest honor. It's got to be, hasn't it? Yeah. I don't want God to, I want God to keep using people, but I want him to use me too. And that's what life's all about.
Well, I'm glad I picked that word out then. I passed the test by picking that word out. Then,
and if you join the message, you have to listen to 4 little talks from me, and the first one is passion. If you're not passionate, you won't like it, the message. If you are, you're going to feel at home.
Yeah. Well, passion is fire, and people get burnt by fire. So it's a natural outcome.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Again, for people listening, go check out the websites. The links will be in the description box. If you're interested in the advance and the training that they're doing, being a part of that global network now, which is expanding rapidly, then please reach out to them, get plugged in.
Yeah, and if there may be nations listening where you not already have advanced. So for you nations where you think, oh no, we're just off the beaten track, or no, nobody's focusing, click that link and jump on board, and let's get advance out to every nation and join you in the vision, Andy.
Great. Thanks a lot, Daphne and Andrew. Yeah, So message.org.uk is the website, and that's the portal to everything we do. So yeah, thanks very much. Stay passionate. All right. God bless. Cheers. All right. See you then. God bless, guys. Love to connect.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, if it inspired you, share it with others so we can see more people engaged in this community.